Fiery arguments from at least 24 major media organizations, including the New York Times, CNN, ABC, the Idaho Statesman, and the Argonaut, which is actually the University of Idaho school newspaper, all of them making a push to lift a gag order that has been in place in the Bryan Kohberger case for about the last 2 years, since 2023. Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime and updates on important rulings like we are bringing to you right now. And it was a big ruling from Judge Stephen Hippler. He is the judge who's been presiding over the Bryan Kohberger and the so-called Idaho 4 case, at least for a whole bunch of months, ever since it was taken out of the hands of Judge, and the venue was moved from Latah County, Moscow, Idaho, over to Ada County and into Boise, which is where it stands right now. It was a big ruling. It was, of course, the issues surrounding the gag order that has been in place for the better part of more than 2 years. It has kept prosecutors, defense attorneys, and law enforcement essentially silent, prohibiting them from speaking during one of the most closely watched true crime cases in recent memory. Of course, there was a Dateline that just aired back on May 9th, and that was the center of a lot of conversation because Dateline, they were able to get their hands on a lot of never before seen evidence that likely would have been exposed in trial, and that sort of forced the hand of Judge Hippler to inquire as to how that happened in light of the fact that, at least at that point, the media gag order was still in place. He threatened an investigation. It's unclear how far that investigation ever got or if it is continuing at this point right now. But we do know that it really ticked off Judge Hippler. So today the question was, will this gag order be lifted? Yes, the gag order is lifted, explaining why, telling the attorneys and the public that since Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to the savage murders of Kaylee Goncalves, her best friend Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and his girlfriend Xana Kernodle, since he pleaded guilty to all of those charges and said essentially, I killed those 4 people, that there was no reason to really keep this gag order in place. The gag order, he explained, was there essentially to make sure that they could seat a fair and impartial jury. But now with this plea deal, no need for a jury to be seated. And therefore, again, the reason that Judge Stephen Hippler said, okay, no more gag order. That all happened back on July 2nd. That is when Bryan Kohberger raised his right hand and took an oath swearing that he was the one who committed those 4 acts of murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He is now going to serve 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus up to 10 years for burglary, and he's waived his right to appeal. And that's interesting because that is of importance as well, because he says, well, I waived my right for appeal. There are still laws in place in the great state of Idaho that will essentially allow Bryan Kohberger to still file an appeal. And that had some people hearing that for the first time on edge, basically asking themselves, what's going on here? He just pled guilty, waiving his right to an appeal, but American law is complicated and layered, and therein lies the conundrum, the fact that Bryan Kohberger still has the ability to file an appeal in this case at some point down the road. Now, would that appeal ever be granted? That is very, very unlikely. The media outlets, these 24 media outlets that I talked about, including CNN, Fox News, ABC News, again, local papers, the Idaho Statesman and the Argonaut, they all said that to keep the gag order would have been moot and unconstitutional, really making a First Amendment claim. A direct quote from their court filing, and I'll read it here. there is no possible set of circumstances under which Mr. Kohberger will ever face a jury. No trial will occur. Thus, there is no need to preserve his right to a fair trial because he has already admitted guilt. And they go on to argue that continuing to enforce the gag order prior to the ruling from Judge Stephen Hippler would essentially be running, as they put it, afoul of the First Amendment. And they went on to say that it is no longer serving any legitimate government interest. The defense had actually continued their objection to lifting the gag order. The state said that they preferred that the gag order not be lifted. Now, keep in mind, sentencing for Bryan Kohberger is set for July 23rd. And at that point, it was going to be lifted either way. So it's really a matter of just about a week's time lifting the gag order prior to the sentencing. But the arguments on both sides of this were quite vociferous. The Judge Stephen Hippler, when discussing the ruling, he said that he had already read all the briefs, so he was not going to take the time from the attorneys, both the government and the defense, as well as the media attorneys, because he had read the briefs. So he just had a few succinct questions. On the defense side, there is a new attorney, Ms. Barlow. She went on to say that the publicity is so extensive, emotions so high, that lifting the gag order would simply add fuel to the fire and would only increase the concern that the defense has regarding the safety of some of the people, notably Bryan Kohberger's family, who apparently plans to attend the sentencing hearing. Judge Hippler went on to mention them as well, and also the victims' families. Even somebody like Judge Stephen Hippler arguably is a target. There's a lot of people unhappy about this plea deal, and so they are taking all the precautions. Judge Hippler going on to say that all the security necessary would be at the courthouse for the sentencing. At this point, the primary purpose, again, to seat an impartial jury, Judge Hippler essentially said, is no longer in play. And that's when he announced in court that he was, in fact, lifting this gag order, otherwise known as a non-dissemination order. He said that either way, the media is going to write about it. He said that he hopes the media respects the people and gives all the people involved the necessary space that they need. And he mentioned, for example, the defendant's family. He also went on to say, as well as the victims. But here, the defendant, Bryan Kohberger's family, of course, there's a lot of ire and anger out there. He feels that they could be targets specifically, so he was cautioning the public to be careful. And he said just because a gag order is lifted does not mean that anyone has to talk. They would still have to offer permission to do so. And he's, again, asking the media to be careful and understanding in their pursuit of getting any sort of story that they want to scoop and get out to the public. He also went on to say, Judge Hippler did, that these sealed motions, and there are quite a few sealed motions, he said that they are going to remain under seal. He himself has to individually go through every one of those motions that have been filed that are sealed, and has to make sure that redactions are in place. He pointed to things like social security numbers, addresses, the names and birth dates of minor children, the birth dates of adults as well. He wants all of that redacted. And so he is going to literally go through it file by file, sealed motion by sealed motion. He went on to say it's not going to take weeks, it's not going to take days, implying it could take months, even upwards of a year, for him to do all that. And that's a question I had. How does a judge actually go through and review all this? You might want to Google something known as Garza versus Idaho. That's some case law that Judge Hippler cited. And that is where he says that waiving the right to appeal doesn't mean you don't have the right to appeal, which is confusing. I'm going to say that again. Garza versus Idaho. Waiving the right to appeal doesn't mean you don't have the right to appeal. And I spoke with Sky Lazaro, who is a criminal defense attorney in Utah. The same similar sort of law applies there, that just because you plead guilty to something and say essentially that you are not going to file an appeal doesn't mean that you can't necessarily file an appeal. It is part of the complex fabric of the American jurisprudence system, and something that the judge is aware of and wanted to make the public aware of. So sentencing set for July 23rd. Surviving the Survivor, me, Joel Waldman, the host of the show, will be there in person, trying to set up some interesting things for all of you at STS Nation. Stick with us for this one. This story really matters. The headline here, the gag order has been lifted. Expect a media frenzy. We'll see what the media gets, including us here at Surviving the Survivor. Love you, America. Justice for Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. See you on the flip side.